Hey all, so we're looking at basic arterial blood gas interpretation today. So while we don't often do this in the pre-hospital environment, it's something that we might come across during retrievals or transports. So that's why we're going to run over it today and do a couple of practice examples. It's usually indicated when there's a patient who needs further investigation on their hemodynamic function, particularly those, say, with sepsis or shock or something along those lines. So when we're looking at arterial blood gases, we need to first know our reference ranges and what areas of the gas we're looking at. So we're looking at the pH, our partial pressure of carbon dioxide, our bicarbonate, and then also our partial pressure of arterial oxygen. So if we look at these a little bit closer, we can see the pH, a normal is 7.35 to 7.45. If we go lower, we're into the acidotic areas. If we go higher, we're into the alkalotic or basic areas. We'll come to this part a little bit more later on. It's to do with compensation. So looking here, we've got the carbon dioxide partial pressure. So that's 35 to 45. If we go low, it's into the alkalotic areas, whereas higher is acidotic. So sort of converse to these. A little trick to remember here is the 7.35 to 7.45. If you take the after decimal points, it's the same normal marks here. Moving into the bicarbonate, acidotic is below 22, our normal range is 22 to 26, and alkalotic is above the 26. Looking at these two particularly, if we look at our carbon dioxide, that's related to our respiratory component, whereas if we look at our bicarbonate, it's the renal or metabolic component. So we'll get into this a little bit closer as we look at interpreting the blood gas, but that's just something important to note here. Lastly, we've got the partial pressure of arterial oxygen. So it won't actually relate to the video that we're doing today, but what we do know is that a normal is about 75 to 80 and up to 100. And if we're lower than that, we're hypoxic. If we're higher, then we're in hyperventilation. So that's our normal ranges. We'll use those as we go into our method of interpretation. So there's a variety of methods we can use to interpret our arterial blood gases. Four-step method is a good one, but one I've come across on YouTube that you might have seen as well is the tic-tac-toe method. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at our pH, our partial pressure CO2, our bicarbonate, and what we're going to do is line them up along our scale here to see where they sit. What we're trying to do, and we'll see in practice in the next video, is that we're trying to get 3 in a row basically, with one of these being the top one. So you might have a pH and a partial pressure CO2 here, which means it would be an acidotic, but we'll talk about that in a second. So we're going to use our tic-tac-toe method to look at a patient whose numbers are here and determine what the cause of this patient's condition is. So if we look at our numbers first, what we're trying to decide is, are they acidotic, are they alkalotic, and then what is the causative factor? So is it a respiratory component or is it a metabolic component? So for starters, we have the pH, so it's 7.23. We look over at our normal range, 7.23 is into the acidotic area. So what we'll do with that number is, on our tic-tac-toe board here, into the acidotic area, we're going to write pH. Next up, we have the carbon dioxide, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So our number here is 50. Coming over to our range, partial pressure of carbon dioxide above 50 is acidotic as well. So the same as above, PaCO2 into our acidotic area. Next we have our bicarb. So this is 30. To our range here, 30 is above 26 into the alkalotic area. So that's going to go over here. So that's our numbers in. We've interpreted our measurements, and what we found is that we've got 3 in a row in this area here. So acidotic, pH, and partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So now what we need to do is determine what the cause is and are they acidotic or alkalotic. So from here we know that PaCO2 is a respiratory component, right? So that means that it's a respiratory cause. So it's respiratory. The next part we need to decide is the pH. So we know it's acidotic because we know it's in this range. So that means this patient has a respiratory acidosis. we'll do another one next. So let's look at a second example here. pH 7.48. Over here, 7.48 is into our alkalotic area, so that comes down to our alkalotic side over here. Carbon dioxide, 42. That's actually normal, so we're going to write that in the middle here. Our bicarb, 35. Down here, 35 is into the alkalotic area, so we're going... Now what does that mean? 3 in a row this side, and we look at the cause, which is our metabolic component, given that we've got the bicarb there. So that means that we have a metabolic alkalosis. So the next thing we'll talk about is compensation. So what happens, the body doesn't like when the pH changes too much, and so if it does go alkalotic, it will do something acidotic to try and bring it up. So usually what that means is that the carbon dioxide and the bicarb will balance each other out. So we've got 3 different types of compensation. We've got uncompensated, partially compensated, and full compensation. So we'll do an example on each of those shortly, but just briefly we'll talk about the pH. So we know that a normal pH is 7.35 to 7.45. Now, within that range, in the middle is 7.4, right, which is dead in the middle of normal. So 7.4 is normal. If we go higher than that, so 7.41 to 7.45, say, we're on the alkalotic side of normal. Conversely, 7.35 to 7.39 is the acidotic side of normal. So that's something to keep in mind as we do these next few examples. Okay, so in the first example, continuing with our tic-tac-toe method, we've got a pH of 7.22 in our acidotic area. We've got a carbon dioxide of 49, acidotic as well. And we've got a bicarb of 24. So 24 within the normal range, right? So what do we have here? Lining up the 3, we've got a respiratory acidosis, right? Now if we look at the compensation factors, as we said, bicarb and carbon dioxide will try and balance each other out to try and bring the pH into normal. So if we are in the acidotic area, bicarb probably needs to be in the alkalotic area to bring the pH into the middle. Makes sense, right? So in this case, it hasn't happened, so the patient is uncompensated. We'll talk about the other 2 shortly. So using the same patient for example 2, we've got a pH 7.22, carbon dioxide 49, and we've now got a bicarb of 28. 28 leads us into the alkalotic area, so we'll put that over here. As we briefly mentioned before, the bicarb, so I should have said what this is the respiratory acidosis again, right? But we've seen here that bicarb is not in the normal range anymore, it's moved over to the alkalotic area. So what it's trying to do is to drag this pH into the middle, which it started to do. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any changes in the pH yet, so this is known as partial compensation. So if we look at patient 3 now, we've got a change in our numbers. So we've got a pH 7.42 within our normal range, so we'll stick it in the middle. Got a partial pressure of carbon dioxide of 32 down into the alkalotic area, so partial pressure of carbon dioxide. And then we have our bicarb of 18. 18 is into our acidotic area, so that's going to come over here. So this doesn't line up with our tic-tac-toe. So what that means, remember how we touched on pH before? We have to study this pH a little bit closer. So 7.42, if we come over and look at our ranges within normal, is under the alkalotic side of normal, between 7.41 to 7.45. So what that means is that this 7.42 has changed and was initially over in this alkalotic area. So PaCO2, should have said pH. So that lines up our tic-tac-toe, which means we had a respiratory alkalosis. Now because it has dragged that pH into the middle, it means that this metabolic component has moved across and has fully compensated to bring the pH into a normal range. So we'll do another one just to confirm that. So in our last example, we have a pH of 7.37 within our normal range. We have carbon dioxide of 33, which is into our alkylating area. And we've got our bicarb of 17, acidotic area. Again, they don't line up, so we need to study this pH. 7.37 is in that acidotic side of normal, right? So that means that this was actually over here. So if you line up the three, we've got this is a metabolic, and we've got acidosis. Now that means that we've in a fully compensated metabolic acidosis because the respiratory component has dragged itself across into the more basic or alkalotic area to bring that pH back to normal. So that brings an end to our ABG interpretation. It's important to remember that an AGB is an isolated snapshot of this patient's journey, and it should be used in conjunction with a comprehensive patient assessment. So thank you, hope that helped.